Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg. Well, slow living, what does that mean? It's an approach to life that's the antithesis of the way most of us live. The fast food, fast pace, fast moving life we all do now. Slow living has made its way into food, art, business, and now aging. And today I'm delighted to have with us Carl Honoré, and he's one of the early pioneers in the slow movement. And most recently, he wrote the book Bolder, Making the Most of Our Longer Lives. Welcome, Carl.
Thanks very much. It's great to be with you.
So, Carl, I'll tell you, years and years ago, in the late '80s, early '90s, when I first started in the food business, I joined Slow Foods and the movement, which I think was originated in Italy, and I marveled at how different their approach to life is, from eating to living to just being, right? And so, I wanted you to talk to us about the concept of living slow.
Well, maybe it's useful to start off by saying what slow is not, because I
Oh,
think
okay, okay.
a lot of people, especially in North America, hear the word slow and they think boring, lazy, stupid, all the things that nobody wants to be associated with. I want to lay it out front that I am not an extremist of slowness. I love speed. Faster is often better, right? This slow revolution, slow with a capital S, whether it's slow food, slow sex, slow education, slow leadership, slow art, slow fashion, whatever it is, it's about doing things at the right speed.
Mhm.
So understanding that there are times to go fast, but there are times to slow things down and to play with all the different cadences, paces, and tempos in between. If you go deeper, I think slow is actually a mindset. It's quality over quantity. It's being present in the moment, doing one thing at a time. Ultimately, it's about doing everything not as fast as possible, but as well as possible, which is a very simple idea, but one that can revolutionize in a really good way every single thing you do, which is why, delicious irony, the slow movement has grown very fast since it came on the scene.
I think everybody's looking for that magic bullet, that one thing that helps us relax. It's the combination of the outer world is not relaxed, and we're trying to find some relaxation and peace, within ourselves. Carl, your books and your TED Talk were wildly successful. What got you started on this quest for seeking out a slow approach?
Well, I think that when we get stuck in fast forward, it often takes a shock to the system or a wake up call to make you realize you've forgotten how to put on the brakes and that this is doing you real harm. For a lot of people, that's an illness. The body one just he just throws in the towel and says, "That's it. I can't take the pace anymore." You have a burnout. You can't get out of bed one day. My wake up call came when I started reading bedtime stories to my son. And in those days, I was just so fast, I couldn't slow down. So I would speed read Snow White, skipping lines, paragraphs. My version of Snow White was so fast, it had only three dwarves in it, right? So it was constantly at loggerheads with my son who'd say, what's going on? What happened to Grumpy? And I got to the stage where I was flirting with buying a book I'd heard about called The 1 Minute Bedtime Story. It's a Snow White in 60 seconds. And that's when I caught myself. I thought, what am I doing here? I'm actually racing through my life instead of living it. And that was my moment of epiphany. And I just thought, no, I need to stop here. I've lost my compass, lost my mind. And I began interrogating not only my own addiction to speed, but the bigger picture. And that's where the whole slow thing got rolling.
That's amazing. Now, in this process, did you feel like you were shortchanging your son? Was your son anxious as a result of your
he
fast pace?
we were both anxious, and I knew because we all have that folk memory of being read to by our own parents, but that happened in my life when I was a child in a much less hurried and distracted age, right? So I remember those moments as being very tender,
Mhm.
unrushed, relaxed, with just being together. Whereas when I would go into my son's bedroom, it was like a battle of wills between my speed and his slowness. And I could feel that it was wrong, but I just, like so many of us, I was stuck in roadrunner mode. I
Yes.
just, everything was about doing more and more, faster and faster, sometimes doing several things at once. And I had just got so embedded in that way of being that I couldn't break myself out of it. So even though I could feel in my bones that this is not the way to read bedtime stories to a 3-year-old, I just kept doing it until I had that moment where suddenly it was like an out of body experience and I could see myself there from the side in sharp relief. And I thought, no, this is ugly. It's unedifying. It doesn't work. Right. And that's
Good for
thankfully when
you.
I put on the
Good for you.
brakes.
I'm going to throw a little science in for a second. We know now that multitasking is very bad for you. And
Doesn't work.
it doesn't work, and it's to a point now that some research studies are showing, and I really would encourage people to look at this, is that it actually short wires you. It short circuits you as you're multitasking remember those days, Carl, when people would say, "I only need 3 hours of sleep. I can do 10 things at once."
Yeah.
On job interviews, what's your biggest strength? I can manage everything at once. And we're learning now that that's not only is it harmful for you, it really doesn't accomplish anything. And
Yeah.
when we step back and see that, you'll see how profound that really is. Carl, I'm with you. I would think most people want to slow down, but society won't let us. Can you speak to that?
Well, I don't think that it's a question of society not letting us. I think it's often the society puts pressure on us, or other people put pressure on us. But a lot of the pressure to go fast comes from within. Very often, if you just glance around your own life or the lives of people who are living around you, you see people standing, I don't know, in line on the bank. And what do? They reach for their phone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody's forcing them to reach for their phone and start doom scrolling through Instagram. But there we are doing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We come home and we're from work where we're on deadline mode, maybe at work, but we're in the kitchen with our family and we're still on deadline mode. We're getting angry when the water won't boil fast
Right.
enough, that sort of thing. And these are levers that we can pull in our own lives that are independent of what's going on in the greater world around us. So that's always, I think, for people, the starting point is to pause, reflect, slow down, in other words, and take a good, hard, long look at your own life and how you're living it. Start by pinpointing those moments where you do have the room to maneuver, where you've got the freedom and the scope to say, you know what? I've been doing this too fast, like my bedtime story routine. Nobody was forcing me to do that. That wasn't society. That was ultimately me. So when you have that wake up call, you're able to say, okay, that moment there, I've got the wherewithal to stop this. And you stop it, you slow down. And then from there, you can build out and start making changes in the world outside.
And I'd like to think that you and anybody who's taking that on would be a role model, whether it's the workplace, relationships, even going to the grocery store instead of, yelling at the cashier because they're not ringing up your food
Yeah.
fast enough, right? Just take a second and say, okay, it takes a few minutes to check out at the grocery store. It takes a few minutes to fill your car up with gas. I did that once, Carl. I want to share with you. I was going somewhere and I needed gas in the car, and I stupidly let the car go down to so low that I absolutely had to go get gas on my way out. And I remember I was freaking out. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to time it and see how long it actually takes to fill the car up with gas. Start to finish, it was 5 minutes. And I thought, it's 5 minutes to not end up with running out of gas somewhere or ending up in some sort of emergency. And I caught myself and I learned that lesson. And ever since then, I'm like, okay, when you need to, when I'm going to put gas in the car, don't jump up and down and shake, hurry up, hurry up. Just realize these things take time. And when you actually measure the time, it's not that long.
It's not that
It's
long.
it's not at all. It's a blip in your day to have safety and security for life. Carl, let's talk about the health benefits of slowing down that most people don't think about.
Well, I think the first is rest, right? When you get stuck in dash to the finish line mode, you're stuck in fight or flight, right? So the body is pumped up, ready to go, always in the adrenaline, foot forward mode. That's fine some of the time, but we also need to take things down. Even elite athletes spend a lot of time resting,
Yeah.
sleeping,
Yes.
recovering.
Mhm.
Human beings, we need to shift gears. Sure, there are times when we need to be going fast, hare mode, but other times get into tortoise mode. So rest and relaxation, better sleep, I think is one of the early and most glorious benefits of slowing down. Another is that you touched on food earlier on. We tend to eat better when we slow down. Just the actual act of eating, by
Yeah.
eating more slowly, that's a healthier thing. The body absorbs the nutrients more. We have time, the stomach has time to tell us we're full, we're going to eat fewer calories. But also we become more mindful of what we're eating, putting on our plate and in our mouths. We tend to cook from scratch more, take more time over our food. And that's of course brings all the benefits that we all know about. And then there's another connection there as well, which is that we tend, when we slow down, to stop eating alone or at our desks, dining al desco, and start
Mhm.
breaking bread with other people, which is the supreme act of slowness in human history. It goes right back to the savannah in Africa, where our ancestors sat around the campfire eating together, right? That's why the English word companion comes from the Latin words con and pane, with bread, because it's when we break bread together that we are at our closest. And that is something I think that it's very much sacrificed on the altar of speed and busyness, is human relationships.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
cannot
That's
you
the
cannot speed them up, right? No matter how much of a rush you're in, you can't make someone fall in love with you faster because you want to get married next month. You can't forge a deep friendship by this weekend because you need a partner to backpack around Asia with you. And you can't download Team Spirit from Amazon, right? These things take time. You have to be with other people in the same physical space. You have to listen. You have to feel. You have to empathize. You have to feel sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes a bit of uncomfortable silence. But that's how you create and forge deep bonds. And we know the science is super clear on this, that one of the cornerstones of a life well lived, of good physical, cognitive health, of happiness, is strong social connections. And slowness is the only route to achieving that.
I'll share a very interesting story with you. I was in France recently and I was getting ready to do a few shows and it was on the fly, which we don't want to do, but I happened to meet these people who were, one was based in Australia and one was based in New York and we were all in France. And I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and write my notes before I interview them. And I went to a little cafe. I was in Cannes, France. And I sat down and I had my notebook and I ordered my lunch. And the waiter came over to me. He says, put your work away and enjoy your lunch. And I said, you know what? I am forever indebted to you. You're absolutely right. And I gathered the
Yeah.
paperwork, I stuck it in my bag, put my sunglasses on, and I just people watched and enjoyed the square and watched the birds eat the breadcrumbs. And it was the most glorious 40 minutes I'd spent in a very long time. So
There's
I want to share
nothing.
that with you. That was just,
Yeah.
do you imagine in the United States and North
Oh,
America, a waiter coming over and telling you, put your work away and enjoy your lunch? You'd smack the waiter or get up and walk out of the restaurant, right? But
yeah.
that was,
That's,
yeah, it was just such an eye-opening experience for me. And this was very recently that I catch myself
I
doing
love
that.
that.
So I'm
There's
loving
nothing.
this.
There's nothing like a French waiter to put you on the
Yes.
put you on the right path, is there? But that's one of the differences I think culturally. I'm Canadian, but I live in London, and so I have a foot in both camps on either side of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And that's something that I love and admire very much in most European cultures, is that over here we spend more time over food. You're more likely to break bread, to put away your work over lunch, to create that sacred space, enter that magic bubble with other people, which we do so well and so naturally over food, which is why I mean, it's not that you can go into restaurants here in London, you can do it in Paris and see people scrolling through their social
Sure.
media, or it happens, of course it does. But I think there's just a deeper, more tidal pull here away from that. Just there's a kind of a deeper memory that there's something beautiful and luminous that can be enjoyed by all of us if we just shift into a different gear at the table. And at the table is such, we talk about the slow movement and so on, all these different branches that it has. But the original starting point for the slow movement, the first area of human endeavor that embraced slow, was food. Slow food. You joined slow food back in the late 80s. It started then in Italy. And it's no surprise that food is where it kicked off, because I think food taps into all of the benefits, or many of them, that come from slowing down, from human connection, health, happiness, joy, productivity, creativity. These things are all intertwined and beautifully entangled with the dinner table.
I love what you said earlier that there's this connotation that if you slow down or you eat slowly or you're more thoughtful, and thoughtfulness takes a little more time, right, than answering abruptly or responding abruptly. That as a society, we look at that as a weakness or a deficit in someone. Do you see that changing now? Do you see Europe's always kind of been there a little bit better? In other words, do you see Europe being more like us now that this tide is turning, or is it still maintained well in there?
I think the whole world has been infected by the virus of hurry. So
Yes.
the whole cult of multitasking and always on and hyperstimulation and shoot from the hip and do everything fast, that has gone global, right? In the modern economy, wherever you are on the planet. Different cultures, because of their own traditions and customs, are inoculated against that virus in different ways. So we've talked about how the European food tradition helps Europeans put up a little bit of a firewall against that, but it doesn't seal them off entirely from it. So
Yeah.
I live in London, and I've just come back from New York City. These are two cities that whose heartbeats move at pretty similar paces, right? There are nuances and differences, but these are very fast places, right? And people are fast, and if they're not fast, they come here and they get accelerated. So I think that's, you know, every country is slightly different, every culture is a bit different, but I think we're all sort of in the same boat. But the point I think you were asking about quick thinking and so on, that's something I think we're finally starting to come to terms with, that fast thinking or reaction, which is immensely useful, right? You have to have it in the workplace, and, you
Yes.
know, shoot, you need that everywhere. But you also need the other side of that equation, which is slow thinking, that deep, slightly messy, open-ended reflection, right? You need reaction, reflection, yin and yang. And I think there's much more in the workplace, much more emphasis now on carving out moments when staff can get away from the coal face, can get away from the distraction and sit in a quiet room or take time off from their phones and just let their minds wander and think. Because, you know, people within the workplace have done the due diligence. They've punched the numbers. They know that this helps the bottom line, right? People think better when they have time to think. So I think we're starting to see a reshuffling in the workplace to allow more space and time for people to think slow in order to think. So when the think fast moment comes, they can do that better, right?
Carl, this is so interesting also to think about is that we've all done this. I'm doing it on a regular basis lately because I'm so busy. I need a vacation. I need to get out of here. I need to go away because I can't take the stress. And I love what you said earlier. Can we talk about some ways to slow down at home, at work, in relationships? You know, what are some tips you recommend to just right here now while you're sitting here,
Sure.
and for the listeners to think about what could I do differently right now? What could I do today to slow down?
I would a few things. Number one, I always suggest to just do less, right? Like set up a triage system. All
Okay.
these offers, invitations, temptations coming in, our tendency, our instinct is to say yes to everything, right? You need to say no, right? You need to pause when something comes in and ask yourself, is this really genuinely important? Does it merit my time and attention? If it doesn't, push it to one side and focus on the things that really do. And by that kind of streamlining will allow you to create more oxygen in your day, more space to slow down and to invest your full self in the things that really count. So that's the first thing, do less. The second, I mean, we haven't really touched on it much, but technology, right? These little weapons of mass distraction we carry around in our pockets.
Yeah.
Start flicking that off button, right? I mean, I for instance, never you my notifications are switched off all the time.
Mhm, mhm.
It's a small change, but it makes an epic difference to how you move through the day because it means that when you have your notifications on, effectively what you're doing is you're letting other people control your time. When you turn them off, you decide, okay, right now I'm into a deep, slow reflection mode, or I'm having a really powerful conversation with someone who matters to me. Now that's done, I'm going to choose to look at my inbox rather than having the inbox breaking into that slower moment and polluting and destroying it. So turn off notifications. That's a good starting point. I think it also helps to incorporate some slow ritual into your day, and that can be anything. It might be knitting, it could be reading poetry or sketching or whatever it is, something that just slows you down in the moment. And just have that with you as you almost physically carry it around with you, something you can just whip out when you can feel the speed rising in your throat and starting to constrict you and overwhelm you. And then another tip I always throw out is Mother Nature, right? Get
Mhm,
outside.
mhm.
We know that being in green spaces has a extraordinary effect on the human body and mind. It's like a tranquilizer, right? It makes us feel calm and focused and serene. So obviously a 3 hour hike in the mountains, perfect. But you can just go out to your local park and lean up against a tree or take your shoes off and walk in the grass, right? Something like that. Just that ancient connection with the natural world can help bring us back in touch with our inner tortoise.
I think that one of the other problems is this catch 22 of we know being alone is bad for us. We know loneliness is a silent killer. Yet people are terrified to be alone. So there's loneliness and then there's solitude, and they're two very different things.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that, collectively, I always say I like to partner with my guests on making the world better. And, one of the things that, I like to recommend is take that solitude when you need those few minutes to yourself, but also try to be a little more brave in reaching out to people when you need something. And that conversation, I feel very strongly about get off the text and the emails and actually have a physical conversation with someone, even if it's a Zoom or on the phone. that connection,
Yeah.
helps tremendously. Carl, I want to talk about the impact that, of those around us who aren't slowing down. What are some of the protective barriers? Because, there's always somebody coming at you that's not slowing down.
Yeah.
What are some, because I know, my daughter's young and she started a new job and she's afraid to say anything and afraid to take, a couple of minutes to herself and afraid to turn down all of the socializing that goes on at night after work. And I always tell her, go once a week. You don't have to go every night with everybody.
Yeah.
Give us some comebacks, if you will, to people who are, because you sound really good at this. I'm not so good at that myself either.
Yeah, that is the hardest thing, especially if you're in a junior position, right?
Yes.
Because you feel
Hmm.
like you can't. That is actually the hardest position to
Yeah.
be in. I think you. I mean, I think the first step is always to do whatever you can to to embrace slow away from the workplace in that case. So at least you're coming in with your slow generator, charged up, and
Yeah.
that will kind of give you a buffer, if you like, against the constant frenzy of that fast person who just can't let go. So that's number one. Try and double down right away on the slow at home. Number two, I think it very often helps to have a conversation with the person. If you obviously this might be harder if you're in a junior position, but if it's in a social situation, just sort of bring up the whole question of pace, of busyness, of distraction, of the feeling of never having enough time. Because what I find is that often the person who is going very, very fast feels the same, right? That kind of constant speed is a defense mechanism. It's a way of walling themselves off from their own panic, their own fear about slowing down. And sometimes it's enough just to say, you know, what is the speed all about? Or does it make sense? And it can break through that kind of protective shell the person has. And then you start having a conversation about why are you going that fast? When would it make sense to go fast? Could we slow down and do things differently? That first step is frightening because you're challenging the status quo, you're shaking things up. But in my experience, and I've had many years of helping people through this problem,
Mhm.
it's just getting over that hump of fear and starting that conversation. And you do find that because people are people, right? Nobody wants to be living like a headless chicken, right?
Right.
Usually it's something that they're affecting, right? They're putting on borrowed robes, right? A way to show off or scare other people or whatever it is. So if you can kind of pierce through that, I think you can um, often just take down the frenzy from that person. And then also try and find allies, slow allies within that workplace or that space, and spend more time with them or start a new way of doing things within the organization with them and show how slow works, right? Don't just talk about it, but show it in action.
That's wonderful that actually bring it as a proposal to the workplace or to your
Yes.
family or to a relationship, wherever you are, even bring it to, whether you're going to get your hair done or you're going to, an appointment to meet with a lawyer or an accountant, is bring that slowing down in. I talk a lot about in my work about how when somebody's doing something slow or taking a minute to answer, your first response is, "What's wrong with this person? I asked them a question and they're not answering me." And I say, because, with age or with experience, you become more thoughtful and you're not just going to blurt out an answer. You're
Yeah.
going to take a minute and we're going to think about this. And so, we want to combat this attitude.
And
Carl,
I just the phrase I always use for this is pilot projects. So you don't
okay.
have to turn up in the workplace and say we have to slow down everything now and
Yeah.
forever. You
Okay.
could just say, why don't for the next week we all try, I don't know, going home on time.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the week we debrief and see how it
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah.
Did the workflow improve? Did people sleep better? Did we feel closer to our family? Do we have more energy now? Do we get more done? If not, what do we tweak? Maybe next week we allow everybody to turn off their phones at 7 p.m., whatever it is, and
Right.
just test it out as a little experiment. And people love experiments, right? They find that less threatening. If you say to a very
Yeah.
fast person, why don't you roll the dice and see what it's like to slow down for 1 week? And if you still love going super fast, then that'll, we'll deal with that when we get there. But
Right.
I think
Have
if you
at it.
just open up the possibility of testing the waters, people taste slow and they don't tend to go back.
I would really like to see people's attention spans coming back.
Mm.
People have the attention span. People have the bandwidth now for maybe 30 seconds. You want to meet with someone. So people say you're taking too long. Just tell me what it is you need to. And I'd like to bring that back. So, how do we combat this attitude of I want it now. I think we need to explain to people it might be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If you're accustomed to going home at 9 o'clock at night and shoving food down and going to bed or watching TV, then all of a sudden now you're allowed to come home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and enjoy yourself. There's a transition period.
Yeah. And there will be discomfort. There will be withdrawal symptoms. There will be
Yes.
guilt. There might
Yeah.
even be a bit of shame, right? Because not only are you making a deep seismic change here, but you're also going against the flow, which is a scary social animals, right? We don't like to step out of line and do something different, but stick with it, right? Ride out those uncomfortable feelings and you will come up the other side. I think discomfort is a really important thing to put our finger on here because I do think that's one of the drivers of the fast living that many of us are caught up in is that for many of us speed is an instrument of denial. It's a way of running away from ourselves,
Right.
running away from the big questions like who am I, what's my purpose here, am I living the right life for me. It's much easier to go fast, be busy, and to sweat the small stuff, the small questions like where are my keys, I have an 11 a.m. right, that's much easier. It's harder to do what Socrates said, to live an examined life, to slow down, reflect, look inside. But it's richer. That's a life worthy of the name, is an examined life. And you can only live that kind of life if you slow down. But of course, as you say, as we've both been saying now, that transition can be disconcerting because if you spent a lot of time running away from yourself, suddenly you turn inward and confront who you are and the kind of life you've been living in autopilot. That's kind of scary, right? It might be easier just to speed up again and run away from that. Don't. Stick with it, ride out the discomfort, and you will come out the other side, living the life that's right for you and in touch with who you are, right?
I love that. And from personal experience, I can 100% say with certainty that you will feel better. When I've made those transitions from the fast-paced craziness to slowing down, I had moments of what am I going to do with myself? I have nothing to do. I'm bored. And then all of a sudden, I really, really took that time and said, this is wonderful to have nothing to do for an hour. You have every right to take a nap in the afternoon if you're tired, or sit down and do something for yourself. Like you say, read a book, knit a sweater, paint a painting, go for a walk in the park. These are such valuable, and at any age, people are
Yes.
finding that older, and I wish people would be finding that younger. Carl, tell us about your work and how to get in touch with you, your books, your TED Talks.
Well, I've written 3 books about the power of slow in a fast world. So, in praise of slowness or slow, depending on which country you're in, Under Pressure, and The Slow Fix. And my most recent book is Bolder, which is about reimagining and reframing aging for an era of longevity. And I've got 2 TED Talks, one on slow and one on aging. You can find everything and actually much more than you would ever want to know about me in one link, which is just Carl Honoré, my full name, no punctuation, carlhonoré.info. And it's
Okay.
all there. Books, courses, you name it.
And we'll put that in the link as well when the show is up. Carl Honoré, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing this valuable, valuable information for our listeners. And I always ask, what do you like about getting older?
For me, that's easy. I think most people who get into the second half of life will recognize this. You just feel so much more comfortable in your own skin.
Mhm.
You feel more at ease with your place in the world. You feel less pressure to tiptoe around other people's expectations and opinions. My favorite quote, or one of my favorite quotes about aging, comes from the legendary agony aunt Ann Landers, who said,
Oh,
"At 20, we worry about what other people think of us. At 40, we stop worrying about what others think of us. At 60, we realize they were never thinking of us at all," which kind of gets to that
yeah.
lightness or freedom, I think, that comes upon us probably after the age of 40, when we just think, you know what? I know what I am. I know who I am. I know what lights me up. I'm going to go out there and take life by the horns. And that's how I feel.
Good for you. And I wish you many, many, many years of health and happiness and continuing on this quest. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Carl.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Age Well, and please subscribe to my channel, Patricia Greenberg, Age Well, for our engaging discussions on all things aging well. And for feedback and topic requests, please contact me at www.patriciagreenberg.com. Thank you again, Carl.
Thanks.